Physics of Enlightenment. The reality of the virtual states of atoms and molecules is a decisive argument for the existence of a non-empirical part of the world. Without their empty states, the atoms and molecules couldn't do a thing. Thus, invisible virtual states are essential for the real world. This is obvious. It seems safe to assume that when theoretical chemists became aware of empty states of the molecules, they didn't search our spiritual history to find an appropriate name. We can only guess that when they called empty states virtual, they were thinking of something that exists virtually, but not really. But what exactly does that mean? When you choose a name for something, you are making a statement, and more often than not, that statement is in the hidden meaning of names. The word virtual has Latin roots. All kinds of Latin words come into swing in this one. Vir, for example, means man. Vir is man, and it means it in made a chauvinist way. Virtus means manliness, but also virtue, value, and strength. This is probably what the medieval theologian and mystic Meister Eckhart had in mind when he invented the concept of the virtual being. Okay. Yes, you read the right. It was a medieval mystic, not the quantum chemist, who first invented this term. Wow. Meister Eckhart wrote wonderfully inspiring mystical texts. The German philosopher Joachim Cooper, who worked in the second half of the last century, has written a classical book on the Meister Eckhart's philosophy. Die Metaphysik Meister Eckhart's, as he explains. Meister Eckhart writes about the universe in its entirety. It stands in the oneness of the God, which originally rests in itself. Oneness is a passion of the mystic. For Meister Eckhart, it was a recurring theme. In its foundation, Cooper describes Eckhart's view: the universe is entirely contained in the oneness. Now, even an inspired mystic such as Meister Eckhart must have been aware of the fact that you have some explaining to do when you place the universe in the wholeness of a hypothetical one, in spite of the fact that the world, as we see it, consists of the countless separate things. However, for the Meister Eckhart, there was no problem. The things Cooper describes, Eckhart's views of the visible world, are out of the oneness of the divine light. In the empirical world, the visible things obtain their reality from the multiplicity of all other things. In God, however, they are in the oneness. In the treatise in which he discusses these things, Meister Eckhart's interest is in the question of what makes things real. Fine. When you read this, you might be amazed. You'd expect a mystic theologian to be interested in God, not the nature of things. And besides, we are always told that it is a privilege of scientists to tell us what the world is like. But in ancient times, science and spirituality weren't as disconnected as they are today, and mystics have the same passion for the finding true reality as scientists. They just go about it in their own way. Of course, when he searches for the nature of the reality, Meister Eckhart isn't looking for matter or energy or some force field. Instead, he proposes, as Cooper describes it, that the standing in the oneness and the truth of God is the ground of the earthly being of the things. In this, Eckhart enters a new dimension. not some physical variables, but the truth of God. Something non-empirical and mind-like is the basis of reality. If you think that this is an odd way to describe the world, just ask yourself how different Euclid's view is from Eddington's statement that the stuff of the world is mind stuff. And if it is a mind stuff, what could be its source? Okay. Unfortunately, Meister Euclid thought the thing of this world don't understand what their true being is. They can never comprehend their own ground, Cooper describes Meister Euclid's views, precisely because in this world they find their fulfillment in the nothingness. Meister Euclid didn't say this, but I am tempted to add that the same principle applies to you and me. If we search for fulfillment in the nothingness of the empirical world, we can never understand our own true nature and potential. With this, we have arrived at the theological foundation of the virtual states of quantum chemistry. The is virtue, or the virtual being of things, Cooper cites Meister Euclid, is their foundation in the oneness of God's being, in which it is completely contained. Really? I have to confess that every time I read this, I have read it many times, I am stunned by the appearance of the ancient mystical concepts in the contemporary physics. What exactly is going on in their minds when scientists are engaged with their research? Does the appearance of the mystical concept in quantum physics mean that the virtual being of ETs also rests in the oneness of the God's being? Even though the quantum physicists emphasize that they have nothing to do with such stuff? Okay. Meister Euclid usually chooses his words with deliberation. When he speaks of virtue, he means virtue. Specifically, he says, as Cooper explains, that the being of things in the unity of God's being is a virtue in the things. Translating it into current language, we might say that their virtual being is their true being. When things actualize in the earthly order, as Cooper describes Euclid's view, their form is won from a state of outside of themselves. Okay. Thus, according to the Meister Euclid, the visible world of things is secondary and inferior. The invisible world and its wholeness are primary and virtuous. Do the same principle apply to the virtual states of atoms and molecules, and their actualization is in the empirical world? You will recognize in these views the typical attitude of mystics. When you are in your body, the mystics say, and not in the oneness of God, you are outside of yourself, apart from any mystical experiences. Our inner sense of existence, too, seems to convey the feeling that our body is secondary, while mind and soul are primary. When you begin to understand your inner sense of existence as a feeling of your being in the oneness of God's being, it will open the door to your infinite potential. Given this historic background, we don't have to be amazed that the virtual world of quantum theory has the nature of potentiality with the aspect of consciousness and wholeness. Many scientists will react with outrage against any attempt to bring their art into the context of natural theology. But the fact is undeniable that by the manner in which it describes the external world, contemporary physics has taken science into the questionable company. The The wholeness of quantum reality, the virtual states, reality as potentiality and actuality, the non-empirical realm of reality, the transpersonal images in our mind and the potential in us. All these concepts have been known for thousands of years in our spiritual history. You can consider their discovery in physics as a sign that progress in science isn't driven by new type of experiments, but by the images in our soul. Okay. Gerald Lothar believes that the power of inner images in us is so absolute that it is possible to think that the historical achievements of the humanity aren't really the work of historical personalities, but of their inner images active in these people. This puts the inner images in us in the context of something non-personal that befalls us, like a fate or destiny. In this, you may also hear echoes here of Hegel when he said that the world is ruled by the cunning of ideas. Okay. As a person who has spent his life as a scientist, I am fully aware of the fact that any reference to anything non-empirical and spiritual is a sacrilege in science, but I don't know how to avoid it. The inner image of psychology, neurology, and quantum theory are a fact. They aren't matter or energy, Meister Eckhart might call them, the virtue in us, but they have the power to affect the material world. They do it in our brain and they do it in all molecular processes. Thus, we must think that the inner image are also at work in the evolution of life. If there is any hope for us, it is a possibility that our continuing evolution is an adaptation, not to increasingly brutal monsters, but to the non-empirical forms of the cosmic potentiality. By this, I mean the process in which our potential is constantly enhanced in such a way that we can fish increasingly complex forms out of the cosmic ocean. Wow! Nice analogy, nice metaphor. We can fish increasingly complex forms out of the cosmic ocean. Wow. For thousands of years, human beings have reached for the transcendent in the world, in prayers, meditations, or offering gifts to their God. Really? Modern scientists believe that they had liberated humanity from such as superstitions. That science now supports the search for the transcendent comes as a shock. It is a shock that drives a metamorphosis of the mind. Searching for the transcendent in the quantum phenomena, we are finding out that the transcendent is searching for us. It is no accident that the description of the world offered by the quantum scientist echoes Meister Eckhart's description, because mysticism is just another empirical method of exploring the world. Meister Eckhart's mysticism is a special kind of physics, the physics of enlightenment.